another episode of the RSL Random Fan Podcast. We're going to do the Come on Crawley update, Come on Crawley preview, whatever you want to call it. We've got Gary Smith, the voice of the Reds from Crawley Town during the season, along with his, what do they call them? They call them color guys over here.
Co-commentator or match day summary, I think, is a
okay.
term.
So, Tony Vessey. So welcome, guys.
Good afternoon, Brent. Good evening, whatever you want to call it at the moment. Yeah, whatever it is to you over there.
Yeah, it's 10 a.m. over here. We were on vacation. We ended up in Oregon, headed to Seattle, and so a little earlier for me. So, what are your thoughts so far on the Crawley Town postseason after Wembley?
Well, I think there was obviously a huge amount of ecstasy around the club, around the town of Crawley, maybe around the county of Sussex as well, about what had been achieved. But when that only lasted a few weeks, Brent, to be honest, because when I went to the fixture release, when the fixtures for this coming season came out towards the back end of June, then Scott said to me in an interview, okay, now this is like a reset, Gary. This is where it becomes a little bit more realistic about what we achieved. And you look at the list of the clubs that Crawley have got to play this season, and it becomes, like he was saying to me, yes, what we did was great, but it's not in the past, but it's something we've always got there, and the trophy's always on display to remind people of what was achieved. But that was a chance to sort of reset and look at what they could do going forward. And you see some of the teams that are in there, it's going to be very, very tough. And I'm sure Tony concurs with that as well.
Yeah, absolutely. You just got to look at the first few fixtures, with Barnsley and, the like Stockport coming down who won the league. So it's every game, you look at every game and you think, blimey, Huddersfield, Birmingham, Charlton, big clubs that have been in Premier League not that long ago. It's going to be a tough ask to just be 19th or above.
I think even Tony, right from the word go as well, because Brant and I were just saying, you look at Blackpool, they finished 2 places outside the playoffs in League One last season, and they themselves, like in 2010, 2011, are a former Premier League side as well, aren't they? Yeah. So, they're going to be, you look at their squad list as I was looking at this afternoon doing my preparation, they're going to be absolutely no mugs. It's certainly not a game where you'll look at it and think, well, Crawley will get 3 points there to sort of kickstart the season and ease themselves into League One. They've had an up and down pre-season looking at their results as well, just the same way that Crawley have done. I'm sure they've done the same and looked at different players in different positions and different formations, and they've got new signings on board, et cetera, et cetera. But it's certainly, 5:30 on Saturday. It's certainly not going to be an easy way to start the season. Not that there's any easy game, but it's maybe wouldn't have been the game that you would have handpicked to start the season with.
No,
at least you get it home.
Sorry, Brian, missed that.
At least you get the first game at home. That's a good way to start, right? Or would you rather be on the road to start the season?
I think you'd like to start at home. It would be my preference as a player when you've just got promoted, familiar territory, home crowd. I think I'd rather start at home if it was me. That's for sure.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. I think Crawley last season got very. It was a very rare occurrence last season that Crawley started at home against Bradford and finished at home as well against Grimsby, because if you start at home, you normally finish away from home. And you sort of had the feeling it was going to be at home because Brighton, the following week when the Premier League starts, I think they started at home as well, which sort of means that a lot of the policing for Crawley's games is also for Brighton's games. So it's very rare that both sides are at home on the same Saturday afternoon. So you sort of had a feeling that it was going to be at home. But I'm with Tony as as a player. I didn't play to Tony's standard, but as a player, you would like to get that first game at home and have the majority of the crowd at least, behind you, for the duration of that game.
Yeah, I think particularly moving up a division, if you're in your comfort zone of you've been in League Two or League One for 3-4 years, perhaps not so important, I don't think. But your first game in a new league, being at home, I think is would be my preference. That's for sure.
Mm.
So there was a pretty euphoric ending to the season, and you can't expect that to last forever. But then there's a lot of euphoria, and then Crawley Town decided to get rid of pretty much everybody that was starting that game. Not their choice. I've heard interviews with Preston Johnson, and we talked to him on our podcast too about the club, and he's mentioned that some of the things they just didn't have any choice. There were options and that were met, and the players are off now playing in different clubs and making a lot more money. So good for them. But are the fans coming back up? I imagine there was a lot of euphoria, then a big crash because what is going on? Have they recovered, and are they looking forward and being a little more positive towards the season? Is that fair?
Yeah, I would say so. Go on, Tony.
No, I think so. As you say, Brant, there was a lot of angst about the players that left. Again, most of the circumstances, there's nothing the club can do really if the players are out of contract or another club's offering 4 or 5 times the wages, or they've got a buyout clause. The club's hands are tied, I think, in most of the circumstances. And I think some supporters find that a little bit difficult to come to terms with. And that's just the nature of football and contracts in any kind of sport, really. And then once the pre-season game started and the fans could see the way the team was playing and the new players were gelling, and I think they had a reasonable game against Palace. I wasn't there that day, but Gary was, and that they could see the style of football was going to be exactly the same as we got used to. Scott will only play one way, and we'll stick to it till death do us part, kind of thing. So I think the tide has turned somewhat to a more positive view than it was certainly when 8 of the starting 11 had left and gone elsewhere.
And Scott said to me today, actually, Brant, because like I was saying to you earlier, via Zoom, I joined the press conference that Scott always does on a Thursday afternoon at about 2 p.m. And he said to me that the fans are going to have to be a little bit patient. As it's not going to gel straight away. There's new relationships across the board in terms of players, maybe 2 newer players playing in an area where they've got to build a relationship, maybe an older player and a new player trying to form a sort of relationship. Like, if we think back to this time last year, Liam Kelly and Jay Williams as the 2 players just in front of the defensive 3, it didn't gel straight away.
No.
But over time, they got used to how each other played, and if one sprung forward, the other held back, etc. But like Tony said, Scott will only play that one way. There's going to be absolutely no change in the style of play this season. And it looks very much like, because one of the first things I said to him today was, did pre-season go as you planned it? And did you get out of it what you wanted to? And he basically said that he did. He said the results honestly don't matter during the course of pre-season. I think Crawley won 3 friendlies, didn't they? Lost 2 and drew with Ebbsfleet last Saturday. One of those defeats, like Tony mentioned, against Crystal Palace. But even in that game, you could see some of those relationships, building. And Scott will have tried slightly different formations. He will have tried players in slightly different positions to maybe where they were playing for him last year, or and you also have to remember, outside of the clubs that have sold their players to Crawley, they're not household names. But then this time last year, people had never heard of Clyde Lodos, and people had never really heard of Danilo Orsi, and we'd never heard of Jeremy Kelly prior to him coming in January. So the likes, I mean, some of the players that have impressed me over the 2 pre-season games that I've seen, Max Anderson, who's coming from the Scottish Premier League, playing in that sort of central midfield role, looks very, very comfortable on the ball. Josh Flint as a central defender. I'm sure Tony will look forward to seeing him as a former central defender himself, but he's now sort of occupying that Lawrence Maguire sort of right-sided. So left-sided, taking that Lawrence Maguire sort of left-sided central defensive position. He looks very comfortable on the ball as well. And I think that's always very important. And Scott always wants to sort of instill that in the side, that everybody is comfortable getting the ball. Everybody's happy to receive the ball. Everybody always wants to receive the ball. Nobody shies away from getting it. I think Ronan Darcy looks a better player in pre-season than what we saw. I think he may get a lot more game time this season. And Jeremy Kelly, who I just mentioned, interestingly, I don't know whether you saw it at Lewis, Tony. Did he play at Lewis?
Yeah.
Jeremy Kelly?
Yeah.
He seems to have, he's been sort of dragged more central.
Yeah.
And he looks like he's going to be a very, very important player this season. Scott said to me, he was important for us last season, Gary, but I take your point that he looks like he's going to be that sort of Liam Kelly pivot type player just in front of the back three. And he will be the link between getting it off the back three and trying to sort of move it into the final third, as it were. And I think, like I say, Darcy's going to be important. Scott Malone's in there with a lot of experience. Like, he's played a lot of games for Gillingham and other clubs as well. And I think, I also said to Scott today, you've got 2 Premier League players as well now on loan for the season, one from Bournemouth, one from Southampton. That has to go down as a compliment to Crawley and to you and the coaching staff for these clubs to be willing to let their players come to Crawley in the knowledge that they're going to play in a certain way and get plenty amount of game time.
So who are those? So you mentioned the 2 club players coming from the Premier League, and is that the Costa Gonzalez and Bragg? Are those the 2?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. Gonzalez has come in from Bournemouth. I'm sure during the course of the season we'll just, in a commentary, Tony, we'll probably just nickname him Speedy or something, won't we? Speedy
Yeah.
Gonzalez.
He's 19 years old and looks like he has some size for a forward, 6'1".
Yeah, and I think he's leaning towards that he'll play maybe sort of wider as one of the wide players. And Cameron Bragg is a player that I've not seen, but he's come on loan from Southampton. And Scott said to me today that he is a very, very, very good player. He's got a good relationship with the manager at Southampton, Russell Martin. And he said he'd watched Cameron play a few times, because I think he's played in the odd game here and there for the first team as well, Cameron Bragg, in maybe sort of League Cup games or FA Cup games or something like that. And Scott said to me he's very, very good on the ball, very comfortable on the ball, and a very, very good passer of the ball. And the relationship's got to work both ways, hasn't it? Scott's got to be ready to take him on board in the knowledge that he'll fit into the way that Scott wants to play and the squad that he's trying to build. And Southampton have obviously got to be willing to let him go to a club where they think he's going to get the right amount of game time and play the game in the right way. So I think I'm not sure that Gonzalez will get a huge amount of game time within the first 11 in league games. I might be wrong. I might be totally wrong. But I think the side that I saw at Aldershot sort of a week and a half ago might be close to the side that starts on Saturday afternoon. And it didn't include Gonzalez.
Well,
it didn't include Bragg, but he hadn't signed by then.
A lot of that also might come down to how they're doing, right? If they get off to a slow start, and they need to shake it up because League One is they bit off more than they could chew for a minute. You know, that
Yeah.
usually there's some desperation that comes in, and they start throwing in some giving people more opportunity. But what about let's talk about the goalkeeper situation. We lost Corey Hadai, who had developed into quite the shot stopper and not playmaker back there, but really improved his game, especially with his feet, and was able to play out of the back and play the way Scott wanted him to. What are your thoughts on Corey not being there this season? And we've got JoJo Walcott. It's probably going to be the player between the pipes, right, to start. And then, is it true? I think I heard Ryan Sanford tore his ACL. So,
Yeah.
we've got Jack Sheik, who is he a younger player, and it looked like they were trying to round up a third keeper to get on the roster since Ryan's going to be gone for a while. So, what are you guys' thoughts? Maybe Tony, what are your thoughts on? You're the defender. What are your thoughts on back there between the pipes?
Yeah, I mean, Woolacott has got a reasonable amount of experience. Looking at his long list of clubs over, because he's 27, so he's got a reasonable amount of experience. If he gets injured, then I'm sure they're desperately looking. Sheikh is a young lad, would have been third behind Sanford. Now he's second, so I would expect we would get another one in on loan from somewhere for at least beyond Christmas to see how Sanford's getting on. But that is, I think, at both ends of the pitch, we've got plenty of defenders, we've got plenty of midfield players, but we've got nobody in the middle up top really, apart from Hepburn Murphy and just Woolacott at the other end in goal, and those are the two main areas that do concern me. Before the start of the season, we've got no strength in depth in either of those positions, and I'm sure there's plenty of work going on in the background to try and fill and bring in some more bodies in those areas. We've got loads of midfield players, like I say, plenty of centre halves. Those two positions are quite vulnerable, I think.
Yeah, you really want to have somebody that can stop goals, and then on the other side, you want to have somebody that can score goals. So,
Yeah.
since you brought it up, Tony and Gary, what are your thoughts on where they are? Looking at the forwards, I saw Muhammadu Fall play in one of the preseason games, and he looks like a work in progress. Looks like to me there's a lot of work to be done there. He's a big guy, but what are your thoughts on who we have registered as forwards? Looks like Harry Foster, Hepburn Murphy, Sonny Fish. We talked about Gonzalez, Adeyemo, and Fall so far. And the big question is, when are they going to sign Max Waters again, right?
Yeah, exactly. That's being announced at 7 o'clock tonight, I believe. So no, I don't know that. Don't quote me on that.
Oh, God. It'll be all over now. You said
that. Yeah, he came on against Palace, Mohamedou Fall, and I agree with what you're saying, Brad. He looks like a bit of a work in progress. Adeyemo came on. I don't know if he came on against Palace. He certainly came on against Aldershot. We saw what he was capable of last season. Sometimes I think the problem with Adeyemo and Fall maybe sort of falling into the same category, and I don't mean this disrespectfully to either of them. Sometimes their brain works quicker than their legs work, and they don't always they know what they want to do, but they don't always remember to sort of take the ball with them as and when they go. And sometimes they're a little bit too tricky for their own good. When it works, it looks fantastic. And Adeyemo, he obviously established himself within the matchday squad last season, scored that fantastic goal that was the winner at home against Notts County, came off the bench at Wembley, and there was always a little bit of a sort of excitement around the crowd whenever he picked up the ball, because he was one of those players who just wanted to pick it up and drive forward, really. Harry Forster, he's taken on the number 7 shirt, hasn't he, this season, now that the squad numbers have been announced? Ben Gladwin obviously now retiring, going on to the coaching staff. Harry, was doing okay, I think, towards the end of last season, and had worked his way into the starting 11. Picked up an injury that sort of kept him out of certainly the second leg at Milton Keynes, didn't it, Tony? That was the change that they made, that he dropped out, and then obviously he wasn't part of the matchday squad at Wembley.
Yeah, I think he got injured in the second MK Dons.
Yeah, he came off in the first game, didn't he?
Yeah. So, you know, if he's worked hard over the summer, I've not seen him on the pitch yet, but if he might not be too far away, he could be not like a new signing, but it's, you know, like somebody coming back. Hepburn Murphy, I interviewed him after the Aldershot game. He looks lively. You know, 2 goals against Crystal Palace, totally at opposite ends of the scale. One was very spectacular, and the other one was the defender fell over the ball, and he just rolled it into the empty net.
You will see that highlight for years on that goal.
He did very, very well. That's okay though, Brent, because then you get my commentary for years to come over the top of it. He took his goal very, very well against Aldershot. It was a wonderful sort of break in field and a slide ball through the Aldershot defence, and he timed his run well to stay on side. He had the presence of mind to go round the keeper and slot it into the back of the net. You know, he said to me afterwards, he feels sharp. He's enjoying playing. He was at Swindon. He's worked with Scott Lindsay before. I don't think he'll be, you know, I agree with Tony, and I think that he's not going to be the out-and-out goal scorer that Crawley need. I don't think he's going to sort of live up to the expectations of what Alsey did last season and get anywhere near sort of, you know, 25 goals or anything like that. He might chip in with, I don't know, somewhere between sort of 10 or 15. But I think Crawley really do need, like Tony was saying, a player up front who is either going to sort of guarantee you that 20-odd goals per season, or at the very least is going to be enough of a target man to sort of hold things up and then bring others into play. If they're not going to be the out-and-out goal scorer, to hold the ball up and sort of bring their teammates into it. The likes of, you know, Anderson maybe springing on from midfield, or Bragg springing on from midfield, or Jeremy Kelly, or Hepburn Murphy, or the Portuguese lad that's going to be playing, it looks like, out on the left-hand side, Armando. Katina, however, it's got Armando on the back of his shirt. So I think, Tony, we're going to have to go for that in the commentary. It just says Armando on the back of his shirt, not Katina or anything like that. And then, of course, there's one name that we haven't mentioned so far in the returning fans' favourite, in Panuche Kamara.
So yeah, but he's again yet another midfielder. Not really a striker, and clearly he's had some injury issues in the last couple of years. Looking at his record, but as they were saying, people have said, you know, he's had a medical, so you would assume that if he's passed that medical, then they're happy with the risk they're going to take to give him a 2-year contract. So,
I said to Scott today, why at this stage of his career was he a good fit for the squad that you're trying to build? And Scott said to me, it's somebody that he admired watching playing when he was at Crawley first time round. He said first of all, he said, Gary, he's a very, very good player. So it's great to have him on board. Yes, like you just said, Tony, he said he knows he's had sort of medical problems in the past, but you don't go to clubs like Ipswich, who have now got into the Premier League, if you're not a good player. I think he had a bit of a loan spell at Charlton or something as well, didn't he? And I think his experience for some of the youngsters in the squad nowadays is going to be vital as well. Yeah. Having played around League One, you know, I think he went to Plymouth when they achieved promotion into the Championship.
Yeah.
He was there for that, wasn't he? And Scott said he's someone I used to enjoy watching whenever I used to watch Crawley when he was here before. Someone he said we did have him on the radar from quite a long way out. You know, quite early on in pre-season, we had him on the radar. There's obviously a lot of bits that have to fit together, a lot of logistics that have to be in place for everything to work out. He said it's been great work by the recruitment team and great work by everybody to get the deal done. He said, and now I'm delighted to have him back. He said, I know that he was a fan's favourite, and I'm delighted that he can now show these fans exactly what he's still got. And he's only 27 still.
Yeah. It just depends on at what stage he's at. I'm assuming he's been training with somebody somewhere pre-season.
Yeah.
Just depends what his fitness level is like and when he will be ready. If he's not ready already, then I think he's going to take some time to perhaps get up to speed, depending on what he's been doing. I'm sure he's been somewhere joining in, maybe still been training with Ipswich pre-season, in the knowledge that hopefully he's going somewhere else.
Yeah.
And like Crawley's been in the mix for a number of weeks, so hopefully he's going to hit the ground running, and he's ready to play. But I would be surprised to see him start. In the first couple of games, probably Carabao Cup against Swindon, he'd probably get a start in that game, and then maybe the Brighton game the following week to get some minutes into him game time, and then he might be ready for the Football League. But all those, like you were just saying earlier, in terms of the striker side of things, it's that the worst thing for a defender is when you're under pressure all the time and you clear the ball and it just keeps constantly coming back. And I even saw the Lewis game with Hepburn Murphy, and I just fear that we haven't got that. When the ball goes forward, it's not going to come back straight away, and where we're in that league, you've got to be able to keep the ball to just ease that pressure for 5-10 minutes, whatever it is.
There's a few other players that have shown up. It's almost a clean sweep here, it feels like. But Gavin Holohan, it looks like he's an older midfielder. And then also Anthony Papadopoulos. Any thoughts on those two players?
Well, Holohan hasn't featured yet at all because he's injured. So he hasn't featured at all in pre-season. So I think he's possibly about maybe 4 or 5 weeks away. So we might see him sort of, mid to end of September, maybe going into October or something. But yeah, like you say, Brant, very experienced midfielder. Came from Grimsby along with Toby Malarkey, both of whom played against Crawley in the final game of last season for Grimsby, in that final league game. Malarkey's actually been playing in the couple of times that I've seen him so far. He's played on the right-hand side of the defensive three.
Yeah.
So Malarkey on the right, Conroy in the middle, and Josh Flint on the left-hand side. Papadopoulos, the one thing I fear about Papadopoulos is I fear for the parents of any child who says that they want his name on the back of their shirt, because it's going to cost them an absolute fortune to get that done. But he's another. I only saw him briefly come on against Aldershot. He looks quite quick. He looks like he's quite skillful. He's another one, like we talk about Lolos from last season, coming in from non-league, where you just hope that the recruitment team have spotted something that they feel that Scott can work with and start to polish, a little bit of a rough diamond. Much the way, jokingly we talked about him before, but much the way Crawley did with Max Waters before. He didn't have a huge goal scoring record behind him when he came to Crawley. Then suddenly he scored about 13 you have to remember, he only played 15 games, I think it was, for Crawley before, scored 13 times, and suddenly Crawley were selling him on for £1 million, which was fantastic. And I think Tony and I were there, I think, to see the birth of it, weren't we, Tony, when Max first burst onto the scene? Yeah. I seem to remember it was a Tuesday night game. I can't quite remember who it was against, but he suddenly burst onto the scene and just seemed to be able to score goals from anywhere, didn't he? Close range, far range, right foot, left foot, headers. He sort of had the lot, really.
He was
Papadopoulos. You hope Crawley have just unearthed somebody, because he was the first signing, wasn't he, as well? So you hope that the recruitment team have seen something that Scott and the coaching team can polish into something even better.
Yeah, I saw him. I think he started at Lewis when I saw him in the first game. He was tidy enough without really, standing out in any way. As you were saying earlier, I thought Flint, he looked good, although Lewis, the opposition, perhaps they did okay, but obviously not the strongest opposition. Flint looked impressive in the first half. He played the first half that I saw. So I think that back three, and Malarkey played on the right hand side the same. So I think that back three looked quite solid from what I saw, and quite happy to play after the back. Conroy, I know he's made a couple of boo-boos against Crystal Palace, but he looked quite confident and good to me. So I think, like I say, defensively, the signings we've made look quite good. We've got a bit of experience. They're not all 18, 19, 20-year-olds like quite a majority of them were last season, when we didn't know who was coming in and what was going to happen. We have got a bit more experience in terms of the signings. Not much League One experience, to be fair, but at least a reasonable amount of Football League experience.
Yeah.
So I think there's after all the departures, and I've did a list today. I've got 15 names on this list of new entrants, which is going to obviously take some time to gel, and it can't happen overnight, as it didn't do last year. And
No.
I think the fans and everybody's just got to have faith in the coaching staff and hope and believe they can do somewhere near to what they did last season. I don't think we'll ever dream of getting near the playoffs this season. And I probably said that this time last season, but I think it's even more likely this year. And from where I watched the fans forum that they had the other night with Preston and Mr. Levin, and survival seems to be the more priority than perhaps looking at ourselves in the top half, just trying to consolidate our position in the coming seasons in League One, and then trying to progress from there. But we'll have to wait and see for 5:30 Saturday, I guess.
We're not there to make up the numbers, is what Scott said to me at Aldershot. We're not just there to make up the numbers, Gary.
No, and that's the attitude he's going to go in with, because that's the manager, and that's why we are where we are, because of that his belief in his own ability and his attitude. So, and quite rightly so.
And he said to me, I guess for a lot of people, we'll start as one of the favourites for relegation. And I said, yeah, there's a lot of people saying that. And he went, didn't we start as favourites for relegation last season as well with a lot of people? We went, so, I don't really read those sort of things or read too much into them. And again, he said to me, we'll surprise some people, Gary. He went, we'll surprise some people. Don't worry about us. Don't worry about us. We won't get relegated.
Yeah, it's funny you were saying about the Palace game. And I think both of us at the Palace game last season, there were sparks of what was to come. That we played quite well against Palace, particularly second half last year, and gave them a good run for their money. Clearly, they took a few players off, but you could see the basis of the way the team was going to play, and that they had the ability to play that way. I haven't seen enough games in pre-season to have such belief in that at this point, and only a few league games in will we know that. But we know the manager will clearly, hopefully, impart his own belief in what we can do.
He is also hoping, Brant, to get a couple more names in through the door, is what he said to me before the transfer window closes at the end of August. He said it won't be done in time for Saturday, but it may well be that there'll be at least two more names coming in before the window closes at the end of August, which, like Tony said earlier, could be loan deals, or it could potentially be other signings for that wonderful undisclosed fee that's always on the website about how much we've bought or sold a player for.
So, what are your thoughts? So we've kind of gone down the roster, and it's obviously much different than it was at the start of last season. Is it a better roster than right now than at the end of last season? Where would you rank that? I saw someone make that comment after the Panucci Kamara re-signing, and I think that's dangerous at times. That second time around often
Yeah.
doesn't go as well as the first time. But what are your thoughts on the roster compared to where we were at the end of the season last year?
I
Tony?
think it's go on, Tony.
Well, the good old, the usual Brian Clough comment of it looks stronger on paper than it did last year. Football's not played on paper, so it does look. There's more experience, as I said earlier. There's more experience in the players that we signed this year than the players that we signed this time last year. So you would to follow that through just purely mathematically and statistically as how we make our signings, it seems, then yes, we are stronger, but we're in a stronger league. So we can only do what we did last year and see whether that theoretical statistical model will pan out on a green grass pitch.
And my apologies for being a bad host and not being more specific and keeping everybody from talking over each other. Your turn, Gary. What are your thoughts on the roster?
I think it's a little bit difficult to compare, really, Brant. I think it's a little bit like chalk and cheese because the squad at the end of last season was very settled. The starting 11 was very settled. I'm not, and I don't mean it disrespectfully at all towards Scott, because obviously he's a great manager and achieved great things last season. Does he know his best 11 out of that squad that he's currently got? He's going to obviously put out what he thinks is his best 11 on Saturday. Does he know his strongest 11? Maybe he does. Maybe he doesn't. Who knows? I think
this time last year he didn't know it then either. So
no.
If you're comparing the start of last season to the start of this season, it's probably no different to where he was this time 4 months ago.
No.
And it was only Christmas time when Lolos started playing regularly and things like that. So
I think it's easy to compare the start of last season to the start of this season, but I think it's difficult to compare the end of last season to the start of this season.
Yeah, I don't think you can do that. You can't,
because it's all very chalk and cheese, and like I said, everything was settled at the end of last season, wasn't it? Like you and I and Brant and thousands of other people could have probably picked the 11 that were going to start at Wembley because he got not lucky, but had a bit of luck on his side, for the back end of the season that everybody stayed relatively fit. He didn't have suspensions or anything to deal with. Everybody was available to choose from. And a lot of the time, the 11 sort of picked itself, particularly when that momentum kept going and they were picking up points and wins. And, obviously they just seemed to gain that little bit of momentum from the last 2 or 3 games of the season into that game against Grimsby, into the 2 games against the MK Dons and off to Wembley, where it's easy to say now, but when you look back on the day, Tony, I don't know whether you agree, when you look back on the day, I don't think Crawley were ever going to lose, were they? No. On the day? Really, with the confidence they had. And, I remember, they scored the goal. They had that VAR decision going in their favour early in the second half as well. And I remember writing on my pad and sort of pointing it out to you to say, this is our day. When that sort of thing happened, it was just a case of, could Crawley get the second goal? Because I never really felt threatened that Crewe were going to particularly get one back. Anyway, that's sort of by the by. Is it a stronger squad this year? Like Tony says, it needs to be because it's a stronger league. Time will tell, I guess. Time will tell. I remember that Tony and myself and a friend of mine, Mick, sort of sat down at the same sort of stage as this last season before the first few games. And when the fixtures came out, Tony was saying, you're probably looking at Newport maybe in the middle of September, where Crawley may be looking for their first sort of home win, as it were, because of the troubles that we'd had the season before. So this season, Crawley should go into the season with a great amount of confidence for what they achieved at the back end of last season, albeit with a completely different squad and 8 of those 11 that went to Wembley and started have gone now. And as gutting as that is, you have to wish them all the best in their pursuits, and you hope that Horsey doesn't come back and bite us on the backside by scoring for Burton Albion against us or something in the 2 games that they play against us.
I'll wager he'll get nowhere near as many goals.
No,
No, as he did
and
for us.
It's funny actually, Tony, because I've seen some other people when they've put their predictions together for League One, they've either got Burton up here, they're going to be sort of challenging for the playoffs, or they're going to be down here in the bottom 4. There's nobody sort of putting Burton Albion. And I did an interview with a guy from Swindon last week who wanted to speak to me about Will Wright, because obviously that's where he's gone off to, and no doubt he'll be back at the Broadfield on Tuesday evening. And he just asked me how he played for Crawley, what were his strengths, what did he bring to the squad, what sort of person was he off the field, etc., etc. And when we spoke about Burton Albion, when we talked about players that had left Crawley, and he said to me, Burton have gone like championship or bust this season. He went there throwing money around like it's going out of fashion. You know, not just Horsey, but I've not looked at the rest of their squad, but other players that they've signed as well. But I'm with you, Tony. And you know, as a striker, you've obviously got to be there and in the right place to score the goals, and Horsey was a lot of the time. But a lot of it is to do with the support play and the link-up play and the way the goals are created. And I, said to Scott last season, and I think you heard it as well, Tony, in that they had to do a lot of work with Horsey sort of early on in the season. Because I know for you, he wasn't always going to be that 20-odd goal striker, was he?
Yeah,
throughout the season.
He wasn't he didn't do enough for me as a centre forward when the ball came up, when he had to challenge for headers, or his first touch was poor on many occasions. And I was saying to one of the commentaries around February time, I didn't think he was that great. And then he went on that run and scored umpteen goals to the end of the season. But I don't think he's that. Again, I might get this thrown back in my face, but I don't think he'll be a good League One player.
No.
And I don't think he'll get anywhere near the goals he got this last season. And if he's starting for Burton come Christmas time, it wouldn't surprise me if he's not.
Okay.
Personally,
Crawley had to do a lot of work. Crawley had to do, Scott said to me that the coaching team had to do a lot of work with Horsey on his arrival time in the box and his body shape of being in the box and his positional play in the box. He obviously came via the sort of statistic recruitment method, that data-driven recruitment method that Crawley liked to use.
Yeah, but his goal record was poor. His goal record before he came to us was not great. Not great.
He got 2 in however many, didn't he, for Grimsby?
Yeah.
And yet he was the player this time last year where the club that had released them to come to Crawley, the fans were going, God, I wish we'd kept hold of that player. Good luck with him. Like he's a really good player. Yeah. He was the one player that fans were saying that about. But let's hope that Crawley gets somebody who either Hepburn Murphy gets the right sort of coaching, or somebody comes in to be that sort of focal point of a pivotal centre forward. Yeah.
Well, Brent was mentioning Fall. I mean, I've not seen anything of him. And if he's that raw talent, he's a big lad, apparently 6'5", isn't he? Something like that. Yeah. So, get a few games, getting on the training ground, work hard with him. Just don't know. They have proved they can nurture raw talent. So let's hope he's one of those.
He looked like he could be a handful for defenders, Tony, because of his size and his sort of leg length, and he's a bit ungainly and a little bit sort of all over the place. And one of those forwards that you probably wouldn't have liked to play against as a defender, because he's just all sort of arms and legs and keeping you from getting anywhere near the ball.
He'll elbow you without doing it on purpose.
Exactly. He'll give plenty of free kicks away, but thankfully, right down the other end of the field to where Crawley are defending.
Yeah.
So this will be a really interesting football experiment this season, won't it? Will Scott Lindsay's system be able to work in League Two, and will they be able to do what they did last time? I have a lot of faith that Scott Lindsay and his system is, if you stick to it and you play his system, they will be good. They may not reach the playoff level. Currently, we're in 9th place to start the season, which is great. If only they went alphabetical, right? Because
Yeah.
Wrexham's down in 23rd, I believe, if
Yeah.
you're looking at it. And I'm just curious, what are your thoughts on the teams in the league? Will Wrexham or Crawley Town finish closer to where they are at the moment, 9th or 23rd? What are your thoughts on the league and the teams in the league?
Well, I mean, Birmingham are the obvious choice, I would suggest, for winning the league. They've pumped a load of money in. I mean, they bought somebody for 5 million in the summer, apparently. So, you know, that's about 10 times what we probably paid out for all our players. You know, Huddersfield should be strong. You know, Barnsley have been there and thereabouts over recent seasons. So, you know, there's a number you could roll off the tongue that, and Wrexham, I'm not sure going straight through again is going to be that simple task for them in League One. I think it might take them a couple of seasons perhaps to make the next step. And I hate to say, we will be in that, as long as we're in the bottom half above 19th. I think that'll be, Scott won't settle for that because he's not that type of coach or person. But we were saying exact same words this time last season. If we're in the middle of the bottom half towards the top of the bottom half, I think that'll be a good season for us. But Birmingham, I think, are bound to be favourites to win it.
Mm.
What are your thoughts, Gary, on the league?
I'm going to stick my neck out and I'm going to say that Crawley will be safe. I think Crawley will be okay. I think we'll finish about 15th, 16th, something like that. So I think there'll be that cluster of maybe, I don't know, 7, 8 teams maybe that are battling not to be part of that, because you have to remember that 4 teams go down as well from League One.
Yeah.
So it's no good finishing 4th from bottom because you'll get relegated. And I don't mean it horribly to any of these sides, but I think when Crawley come to face the likes of Stevenage, Cambridge, Burton, teams like that, I think are the teams that Crawley have really got to make sure they take points from. And when it comes to the likes of, you know, like Tony was saying, Birmingham, Huddersfield, who else is in the mix? Barnsley, Wigan Athletic, Reading, Charlton, Blackpool, even on Saturday afternoon. I think Crawley getting points from those sort of games will be a bonus. Peterborough. Yeah, exactly. Were they the losing playoff finalists, Tony? Is that who Oxford beat to get promotion? Oxford, did they beat Peterborough?
I think they got beat in the semi-finals, actually.
Possibly. I can't remember who Oxford beat now at Wembley to get promoted. But there's a lot of big teams in there. But I think Crawley will be okay. I think that as well, perversely, the ground at Crawley could play into their own favour as well, because it's going to be the smallest ground, I think, capacity-wise in League One.
Right.
Go to Wigan in a few weeks' time, it's going to hold, 35,000? Go to Birmingham, it's going to hold 25 to 30,000, whatever it may be. But I think Crawley's is possibly one of the smallest, if not the smallest, capacity-wise. And I'm not too sure that many teams will really enjoy coming there if the crowd get behind Crawley to be like a 12th man, if Crawley get themselves into a 1 or a 2 goal lead against, you know, some of the so-called big teams. Because it's also one of those stadiums, Tony, where the crowd are pretty much right on top of you, aren't they?
Yeah.
As well. there's no sort of big gap between the side of the pitch and where the fans are sat. You know, some of these grounds you go to, you think of West Ham, where there's the athletic track size gap, isn't there, between the side of the pitch and the fans. I'm not too sure that too many teams will like to come there. It's like when they say Premier League sides going to places like Crawley for an FA Cup game or something like that. I think a lot of Crawley's games this season are also going to be, it's going to be on a level playing field because it's in League One, but it's also still going to be your classic sort of David versus Goliath type game.
Yeah,
I think, isn't it? And yes, there'll be bumps along the way, but I think Crawley will be absolutely fine. I think it's going to be an exciting season. I'm really looking forward to being back behind the mic on Saturday afternoon. I'm a little bit gutted that it's a 5:30 kickoff, I've got to say. I don't mean it disrespectfully towards Ken, but I'm gutted that Tony can't make it on Saturday. But I'm glad that we're sort of reunited for a commentary on Tuesday evening against Swindon in the Cup. And honestly, if you'd love to see them win on Tuesday night, but if Crawley don't have any sort of great cup run in either the League Cup or the Bristol Street Motors or the FA Cup to concentrate on survival in League One this season, I think has got to be the most important thing.
Well, I will be watching on iFollow, so if you want to turn me up so I can yell, that would be
okay. We'll do that.
Yeah, the club. I'll do my best. To,
I'm delighted. I'm delighted the iFollow is still going as well, Brent, because that was there were some transfer rumours for Tony and I as well. You know, towards the end of last season and during the close season. So I'm delighted that we're both still there. But I'm delighted we both signed a new contract.
Do they call it a pink slip in America, Brent, when when you're out of job? I thought I was going to get a pink slip like middle of May.
Yeah, they do call it. They don't call it redundant, but they do give you a pink slip.
Yeah, it wouldn't have come from me, Tony. I wouldn't have given you that.
No.
So
not after that fantastic commentary we delivered at Wembley.
So they did sign I think they did sign a deal with CBS over here. So League One will be there'll be more options, but I will definitely be on iFollow unless they cancel out or something, however that works. But so I renewed my iFollow. I'm not going to buy a season ticket, but I can do the iFollow. But you as commentators, I went to they talk about horrible places to go watch games, and I heard that I've heard many people say that the worst place to go was Forest Green in League Two a couple seasons ago, and we actually went there and had a great time. So I don't know what they're talking about, but are there any grounds that you're looking forward to you haven't been to that you as commentators are looking forward to having an experience? And there's any on the other side that you just don't want to go to for any reason? You just don't like the team, or it's it's a terrible place. Tell me. Why don't we go with Gary?
Well, I'm looking forward to grounds that I've never been to as a commentator. So I've been to a lot of the grounds in League One to see Brentford over the years, but I've never commentated at Birmingham. I've never commentated at Wigan or at Reading or at Barnsley or at Huddersfield or places like that, places that I've been to see games. So I'm looking forward to going to places like that, because normally you look down the fixtures when it's in League Two and you think, oh, Barrow, it's not a great place to commentate. It's a heck of a journey. It's not a great place to commentate. Carlisle, at least the facilities are okay, but it's a heck of a journey again. I'm where? Fleetwood, yeah. Morecambe, again, facilities were okay, but it's a heck of a journey to get there, and generally get beat 1-0 on a Tuesday night in the last 5 minutes, and then you have to sort of make the journey all the way back home again or something like that. I'm also looking forward to going back to places like Exeter. Obviously it's a well-known fact that my wife and I enjoy spending time down in Devon, so it's nice to have the fixture back in Exeter as well. I guess of any grounds that I'm not overly looking forward to, I think the one that springs to mind, and again, I don't mean it horribly, they might not be looking forward to coming to us, is to go to Stevenage. It's not a great position. It's very sort of tight within the commentary position. There's not a great deal of space for all the equipment and things that you need. And I think when you talk about Forest Green, Brad, that's what people mean by that, is that, hold on a sec. Oh, you still there?
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, sorry, my battery thing just came up, so I'm running out of battery on this iPad, I think. Yeah, I think that's what they mean by Forest Green, is that it's very cramped. It's quite tight. There's not a great deal of room for all your equipment, etc. And you also only get sort of vegan chicken nuggets and chips and coffee that's served with soya milk and things like that. And a lot of people will like coming to Crawley for the hospitality side of things, because Ken does a great job with the hospitality for visiting teams when they come to Crawley.
Yeah.
And Tony, you do the home game, so I guess that's not a great question for you, but will you be traveling more and getting out to games?
But it's funny you should say. I was out with some friends on last Friday night, and they came to one of the games last season at Crawley, and we were having a little discussion about having a few away days for Crawley. So, for me, many years ago, I played at Charlton, I've played at Cambridge, I've played at Peterborough. So, there's a few grounds I've played at back in the day, as they say, which I wouldn't mind revisiting. I'd like to go to Birmingham just to experience the ground there. Was a Premier League ground. So there's a few possible non-commentary social trips I might make
Gary can give you a ride.
in the season. Yeah, I think most of us are going to go by train because it may involve the odd beverage or two. I'm not sure.
Yes, you want to travel safe. And speaking
That's
about
a point. That's a point, actually, Brant. I'm looking forward to doing a commentary at Peterborough, because last season when Crawley went there for the Bristol Street Motors game, I got all my stuff set up, and then the game got called off an hour before the kickoff because of icy conditions. And then when they rescheduled it, I couldn't make the rescheduled date, so I never did get to do the commentary at Peterborough. So I'm looking forward to going there.
Oh, nice. So yeah, so we went to I thought it was really interesting that a lot of people were complaining about the Forest Green, and we had a good time, even though we got waxed pretty good that season. That was the year they were promoted, 6-3. But we went to Bradford, and I'm like, wow, who would want? Who would? I know Bradford and Crawley seem to have a little bit of a rivalry on the fan side, but man, Bradford, that was not a great place. We have to worry about it this year because they're still in League Two and we're not. So
Hey, there you go. There you go. Those sort of places not on the agenda this year.
yeah, that'd be a great question too. There's got to be a couple places you are so glad you don't have to go back to this season, but it is kind of
You named four of them right off the bat. Fleetwood, Morecambe, Carlisle, and Barrow.
Barrow.
Barrow's.
I don't mean it horribly, Brant. Barrow is horrible to commentate at because they put you in a glass, like an internal thing, so you're commentating through the glass, which I really don't like.
Oh no, you got to be there
because all you can see back in the glass is pretty much your own reflection.
Oh, yeah, that sounds terrible. Sounds terrible.
It's not great.
Awesome. Well, any final thoughts? Your previews. I think Gary's kind of said they're going to be. You're comfortable. You have some faith in Crawley staying up. What about you, Tony? You said the same thing. Any thoughts on how you expect this season to go? Maybe start with Tony and then go with Gary.
I think the season will follow a similar pattern to last season. We might surprise a few people early on. Then you're bound to have a run, a not very good run, which we did last year. Before Christmas, things pick up. I think it will ebb and flow as the season goes on, and that we will be fine, and we'll survive without too much worry. But we won't have the finish that we had this season, or the season just gone. So we'll be fine. Like Gary said, if we're 15th, 16th, 14th, around that area, I think that's probably a reasonable expectation. And if we're any higher than that, then again, that's be a real testament to the coach and the coaching staff. and the style of football that we play. Gary's wandering around the room.
Yeah, I'm looking for power.
I'm just trying to plug myself in to recharge just a bit. It's amazing how much energy these Zoom calls take from. There we go. Is that doing something?
I think we'll be fine. Start's quite important. We had a decent start last season, which certainly I didn't predict. And if we can, start gaining confidence and picking up points early on, then that'll stand us in good stead for the rest of the season.
Feel the same way, Gary, or a little more optimistic, a little less?
No, pretty much the same. Like Tony said, I don't think you can expect anything like the season that we had last season, and I don't think, it's a silly thing to say. Would we want to be involved in the playoffs come the end of this season? Yeah, of course we would. But then you're talking about a gigantic step from League One into the Championship, and I just think Crawley have got to have a season or two where they just make themselves a well-respected, good, solid League One club, to then start thinking about maybe sort of, pushing towards the upper echelons of the playoffs and maybe sort of taking strides towards the Championship. I know that the ownership group have got a plan in mind where the Championship is supposed to be achievable within 5 years. They've done, League Two to League One within 2 years, so it's not unrealistic. But I think this season has got to be about consolidation. Is a horrible word because it's not a word that's in Scott Lindsay's vocabulary. I know he doesn't like to use it. He's like, I want to win every game and win the title by the end of February or March or something silly like that. But I think realistically, he must be thinking we need to just, get points on the board as quickly as we possibly can, because what you don't want is 5 games into the season, 6 games into the season, Crawley have got maybe 3, 4, 5 points, and you're sort of playing catch up for the remainder of the season. I think if Crawley are never in that bottom 4 for any stage of the season, maybe apart from the first 2 games, maybe if they're not in that bottom 4 when the season starts to sort itself out, I don't think they'll be there come the end of the season. And as I said earlier on, I think they'll finish about 15th, 16th, something like that, in a very, very respectable position without doing anything overly fantastic. I think they'll be absolutely fine. And I think as strong as Blackpool seem, I think the momentum from last season will carry on a little bit into Saturday, albeit with a different squad of players. And I think Crawley will start the season with 3 points on Saturday.
Awesome. I'm glad you touched on the ownership. I think the fans are still a little tentative, some of them, but for the most part, I think the fans are probably, you guys are there, but the fans are probably a little more comfortable with the direction, with Preston Johnson going over there and bringing his family over and being there full time. I think there's a lot to be positive about with Crawley, and I'm hoping that I don't know if maybe I got to sell a kidney, but if we can get back over there and get to I want to make sure we get to a League One game. We'll see how it goes. We'd love to get back. Obviously, you see my daughter and her family who are over there in Cheltenham. We certainly don't want to start the season like Cheltenham. Cheltenham in League One last year had one of the most awful starts I've ever seen, and probably anybody's ever seen. They went eight games before they scored a goal. It was pretty horrific, and they fought hard. They fought honorably, but they ended up hitting the drop. But that would have been quite the save if Cheltenham had turned that season around. So hopefully we don't have anything like that, and we have the season that you guys are predicting. I agree with you. I think Scott Lindsay has the ability, and the players play the system. I love the way they play football. I think it's brilliant, and it keeps them in games. And the other team can't score if you have the ball, but you also don't, if you can't score if you just passing the ball around the back either. So, but I think there's a lot to be hopeful for. Hopefully, we'll get some more fans over here. I'm recruiting. I got some young kids that everybody has to have an RSL podcast, I guess, if you're an RSL fan now. But there are some young kids that have said that we had them on our podcast, interviewed them, and they're Crawley Town fans now. So who knows? Maybe by the time we're done, I'll have 1 or 2 dozen fans over here for Crawley.
Right.
Good stuff. Good stuff,
Well,
Brent. Good stuff.
Thank you for joining us again. I love talking Crawley Town, and we will see or hear you on an upcoming Saturday or Tuesday, right?
You
Yeah.
certainly will. Saturday for me, and then both Tony and myself on Tuesday evening for the cup game, Crawley versus Swindon.
I'll be watching. Well, thank you for joining me again, and have a great rest of your week, gentlemen.
You too. Cheers.
Cheers.